excited to be here. Excited to talk about what's happening from a retail market analysis standpoint here in Longview. I'm going to start with kind of an overview of what we are doing through this project, our retail market analysis. Not just during this overview, not just looking at that the I-20 corridor, that site there, but just really a quick overview of what we're doing. One of the things I wanted to point out here is we're focusing on 6 different retail submarkets in the community, and this is what our team has come in and really identified these being the top 6 submarkets in the community from a retail standpoint. Longview is too large to do a retail analysis on the entire community. You really have to break it into these different retail submarkets. You can see the Interstate 20 submarket there, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. You'll see the downtown, looking at downtown as its own submarket. Who's going to locate in downtown from a retailer, from a developer standpoint, is obviously going to be different than who's going to locate in some of these other submarkets and vice versa. We've identified the Highway 80 submarket, the North Loop, the mall area submarket, the emerging Oak Creek submarket, as well as the Longview, the western submarket there. So we're going to be taking a look at each of these submarkets, like Mr. Joyce talked about. Really focused this on this the 6.62 acres, the 20 corridor there. So wanted to point that out. Our team, in order to understand a market, in order to understand what's happening here in Longview, we had to know where are the customers coming from? Who are those customers? And anybody can take a look on a map and see that you're getting people from a regional standpoint. People are driving here to shop and eat. This is a major hub for retail, for restaurants, those sort of things. But a lot of the retailers that we talked to initially are interested in Longview, but they were having trouble pulling the trigger. They weren't exactly sure. They want to be here. What's going to put them over the top? So our team several years ago developed a way to actually study license plates, to actually go into a shopping center, capture a license plate on a video, and actually take that to a specific home address. So we could go through Walmart's parking lot. We can go through the mall's parking lot. We can go through the centers on the Interstate 20 corridor and actually scan license plates and find out where people are actually coming from. So really factual data to tell us where people are coming versus, a computer model, dropping a 20-minute drive time or a 30-minute drive time around the community. So what you see on the screen here is our team has been out to Longview so far 3 times to do our license plate analysis, where we've been in each of these different submarkets, scanning license plates, really trying to identify who that consumer is, who that customer is. So you can see up on the map here, every one of these blue dots represents a family, a household that's shopping here in Longview, maybe eating here. This is their main retail hub. You can see the kind of the conglomeration of dots there in the middle. But once we start plotting enough of these points on a map, you start to see that retail trade area, where those consumers are coming from to shop and eat here. So based off of this data, we've identified this area here as what we're calling the retail trade area. The retail trade area is where those consumers that are shopping in Longview, where they're coming from on an everyday basis. Now, you're getting people from outside of this trade area. We understand that. You can see your trade area cuts off towards Tyler. Tyler has retail, has restaurants, cuts off to a certain area there, cuts off to Shreveport, extends very far to the north, very far to the south. Very large trade area, and we knew that. A lot of the retailers that we have talked to initially, a lot of the restaurants, a lot of the developers knew of Longview, but didn't know too much about how large was that trade area. So I think we've opened their eyes through this analysis. I'll be able to talk about that more in a minute. But just inside that retail trade area, that yellow square we had up there, 411,661 people come to Longview on a regular basis. That's what we're calling your primary retail trade area. Those are consumers that are shopping here on a regular basis. Expected to grow quite a bit over the next 5 years to 426,416 in that retail trade area. So a very large retail trade area going forward, and what we've shared with the LEDCO board already is going forward, let's sell Longview to these retailers, to these developers based on that trade area population instead of that city limits population. Just opens you up for a higher caliber of retailers. Very, very strong population, very strong growth numbers there. Median age was 37.8, average age was 38. That's on track with about what the state average is. Your average household income, $61,468, so strong there. Median household, $46,000. 170, and the per capita is 23,000. So this is just a quick snapshot of demographics, but the key on here and what has gotten retailers and developers interested so far is that trade area population and the growth. To some of them, it surprises them. Others say, yes, that is a huge market. So using these numbers, this is just a snapshot. We've got hundreds of pages worth of demographic information. But once we had that trade area defined, we really wanted to find out what is the opportunity from a retail standpoint. So what are people spending money on every day in Longview? What are they leaving town for? What are they driving to, other areas to shop? What are they doing? So what we've done is we've run what we call a gap analysis. You'll hear it referred to as a leakage analysis. It'll tell us how much money is leaking out of that retail trade area, for a lack of a better word, and going other areas. So this gap analysis tells us what is the opportunity here in Longview. So the first column, or the second column here, what we've done is we've broken retail into 88 different sectors. So everything from sporting goods to casual sit-down restaurants to fast food restaurants to electronic stores, they have a category in this gap analysis. And I just want to pull out a few of them here. But potential sales, which is the third column here, potential sales is the opportunity. That is what those 411,000 people in the retail trade area are spending every year on retail goods and services. $6.1 billion every year. Then we looked at actual sales. What's actually happening within the city of Longview? $1.96 billion within the city limits. What that does is that gives us a leakage of about $4.1 billion that's going other places. Whether it's to shop, whether it's to eat, whatever it is. We've broken that down into each of these categories. The key here is we're not immediately going to capture $4.1 billion in retail sales. But if we can reduce that by 10%, over the next 3, 5, 7 years, that's a goal that can be attained, especially by reaching out to some of these developers, looking at properties that maybe are not serving their highest and best use, that need additional retail development. So want to make that point clear. We're not trying to just capture $4.1 billion right away, but over time we want to chip away at that leakage number there. This analysis has been key. We've been reaching out to retailers and restaurants really only for about a month or a month and a half, actually reaching out to retailers and developers. This gap analysis, along with the trade area, is really getting their attention. It gives them factual information, the license plate analysis, factual information they didn't have previously. So you have leakages in a lot of the categories. Wanted to point out a few things. From a sporting goods standpoint, hunting and fishing, you're still leaking about $37 million on an annual basis. We looked at general merchandise stores, $182 million still leaking on a regular basis. Looked at restaurants, about $200 million that we're losing on a yearly basis from the casual sit down. So we've got this in our toolbox, so that when we're reaching out to retailers, we're reaching out to developers, whether it's for the site we're talking about or for these other submarkets, gives us factual data to take to these retailers, these restaurants, to convince them they can't afford not to locate in Longview. And that's our goal at the end of the day. You cannot afford not to locate in Longview. You need a location here. Maybe you need an additional location here. So that's the goal of this process here. Once we had that gap analysis complete, we wanted to understand the consumer within that trade area a little bit better. What are they buying? What are their shopping habits? How often do they leave Longview? What stores do they like to shop at? So we ran what's called a psychographic analysis. And just to show of hands, how many of you have heard of psychographics before? Anybody in here? Okay. I know the board over here has. Psychographics is one of the newest things in the retail industry. It's pretty neat. Bass Pro Shops, Walmart, those were two of the first to start using it. But the best way I've heard it described is, we talked about demographics a little while ago. We all know what demographics are: age, income, those sort of things. Psychographics, best way I've heard it described is demographics on steroids. So instead of looking at me based off of my age, my income, those sort of things, it's looking at me based off of what brands of clothes do I buy. Do I shop at the Children's Place for my kids' clothing, or do I shop at Carter's? So it really helps us understand the consumer a lot better. Good example is Bass Pro Shops. There's the reason why the Bass Pro Shops in Shreveport, carries different items than the Bass Pro Shops in Grapevine, or the Walmart in Tyler carries different items than the Walmarts here in Longview. They're using psychographics to really pay attention to who makes up that market. So I won't spend too much time on here on this part of it, but what we have done in our psychographic profile is we've broken that retail trade area into what we call different segments, or different tapestry segments. So each of these segments has a name tied to them. So if I start reading through some of these, you might say, hey, that's the category I fit into. But really categorizing these tapestry segments throughout that trade area helps us understand what retailers are going to fit, what retailers, developers should be here that aren't here. Just to show you a couple of quick examples. A good example, one of the categories that makes up quite a large piece of Longview is what we call southern satellites. And what our analysis does, what our profiling does, goes in and talks about what the average household size is, 2.65, what the median age is, what the median household income, talks about what stores they shop at, what types of projects they like to work on, what types of brands they do. So each of these subcategories, or each of these tapestry categories, will show us what are people buying. We have something called a propensity report that'll tell us people living within that retail trade area are 10 times more likely to buy a specific kind of car within that trade area than they are the average Texan. So psychographic analysis, very useful when we're talking to national retailers, talking to national developers. Most of your retailers, I saw a study that said roughly 60% of retailers, national retailers and restaurants, are using psychographics. So having this information available, having it to be able to show to a specific retailer, specific developer, the segments you're looking for are made up within this trade area. About 60% of them are. So wanted to point that out. Diners and miners was another category there. Rooted rural. Obviously in that trade area, you've got quite a bit of rural area out in that trade area. So that was a large segment as well. Salt of the earth was another category. The cozy country living is how it's described. But our analysis, and I don't have it on the screen here, but it goes into very much detail on what people in these categories are spending, how much money they spend on an annual basis on each of these categories. So very, very neat information there. This is something neat we've done as well, and I think it's going to be a very useful tool for LEDCO, for the City of Longview, for the Chamber of Commerce. And this is something we have done is put together what we call our interactive mapping application. And we've talked about all of these demographics, these psychographics, these reports our companies come up with, and reports are great, but at the end of the day, it's a report. It's a lot of typing on there. But what this does, this interactive mapping, is we have actually, working with our partner Esri, which is a provider of demographic information, we have actually come up with an application that you have access to, where we can click on a button up here. We can click on tapestry segmentation. It'll pull up that psychographic profile, just like you see on here, in real time. You can run reports. You have the ability to run reports. We can pull up, if we're meeting with a retailer or developer that has interest, we can click on a button to pull up what the demographics are of the trade area. So while we're in meetings with them, while we're on conference calls with them, having access to this, we can automatically send emails out. We can run reports within this application. So really taking this analysis to the next level, being able to send reports, being able to customize reports. So this application is available. It's running. We've already been working with several retailers, several developers on that application. So for the first part of this analysis, or for the first part of this presentation, that's just a quick overview of the analysis. Our team, like Mr. Joyce mentioned, we got started in about October. Doing this analysis, started with the license plate analysis there. In December, we're told to take a little bit more of a focused approach on this site, on this corridor here as well. We have just recently started reaching out to retailers and developers. I will tell you, from a retailer standpoint, we've made our first round of contacting. We reached out to 40 quality retailers and restaurants. In the first 40 that we've reached out to, we already have 10 that are interested in coming to Longview. So it's kind of an unheard of number of good responses initially. So that's some great information there. So we're working alongside Susan, her team, Diana, helping these retailers, these restaurants find sites, so they're ready to go. And then we've also started reaching out to developers, and we'll talk about the developers after we get through the next round of slides. But didn't know if this might be a good time for questions on the initial part, or if you wanted me to keep going. How did y'all want to do that? Keep going. Gotcha. So our focus, like I said, in December was shifted to focus and look at this, the Estes Parkway and I-20 site. I was out there again today, just spent about 30 minutes in the area looking at the site. Not just myself, but our team has been out here looking at the site and really put together this analysis based on the site. Initially, we just wanted to take a look. We knew what the trade area was, about 411,000, but a lot of these developers, a lot of these retailers that we're going to be talking to also want to see radials. How many people live within a specific radial? So what we've done here is we've looked at 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, and 40-mile radials. And the numbers are pretty staggering once you get out there. But within 5 miles, you've got about 36,708 that live in 5 miles. Get down to 15 miles, you've got about 164,534. 30 miles, you're at 312,361. And just at 40 miles, you're at a population of 530,988 people that live within that site, about 40 miles of that site. So you can see the average household incomes there as well. Those look good to retailers. That's a quality number to have there. So, it's pretty staggering to see just within 40 miles of that site is over 500,000 people. That's pretty amazing. What we've done is just looking at the 6.62 acre site there is ran a retail potential analysis just on that site, looking at a few sectors. And I wanted to point those out. Just on that site, based on the population around that site, we're looking at 21 million retail opportunity, retail potential for a drugstore or pharmacy, something of that type. Some of the others that stood out, full-service restaurants just at that site's about $18 million in opportunity. Limited service eating places was about $16 million. Sporting goods stores was about $10.7 million. So definitely quite a bit of opportunity around that site on that corridor there. So wanted to point that out as well. We looked at traffic counts. We're also trying to get some more up-to-date traffic counts. Your traffic counts are good, obviously, along the interstate there, and also the kind of that on Estes, that gateway corridor there as well. Traffic counts look good. 35,000 is what we're looking at on Interstate 20. Like I said, we're looking at some new traffic counts coming in as well. So really good numbers there. Hope to get some new numbers as quick as we can. Just looking at the area retailers there, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this. We did some research in talking to people that lived outside of Longview. We talked to several retailers, developers, just getting their opinion on this corridor here. And what we heard quite a bit was it's a little rundown. It needs some redevelopment. We heard that quite a bit. So that was something that came up. For a lot of people, this corridor right here, those that don't know traditional Longview, that don't know downtown Longview, that don't know the mall area, West Longview, other areas, their only knowledge of Longview is this Interstate 20 corridor here. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was a kid, I grew up in Keller, just north of Fort Worth, and we'd make the trip once a month to visit my grandparents that lived in Alexandria, Louisiana. So we would drive on Interstate 20. We would always stop and in Longview and get something to eat. But I didn't know back then. I didn't know there was another part of Longview. I thought that was Longview. So a lot of people, this is their opinion. This is what they know of Longview. So definitely in need of retail redevelopment, some new additional development there. A lot of people stop at that Cracker Barrel. That is one thing that gets them off of the road there. So some of the area retailers that are there, but a couple of just quick site observations that my team made while we were out on the site. Development on the site is limited a little bit to the small size of the site. There are quite a bit of things you can do with that. 6.62 acres. Really, any additional acreage that can be combined increases the square footage. There's some topo or topography issues there. Regional site with good visibility from each direction. Our team tried to come in looking at it from each direction. It's very much a gateway site. It's a great site. We see the site having the potential, and I think some talked about it earlier, potential to be a catalyst for this entire I-20 corridor. There's some redevelopment that needs to take place, some new development that needs to take place in this corridor. Currently, the corridor, I talked about this already, known for lower-end service, limited service hotels, properties in need of redevelopment, limited service restaurants, strong traffic counts, just another observation. But one of the things, and I'll tell you, I drove in today coming in from Terrell. I was in Dallas for a meeting, came in along Interstate 20. There is a lack of regional retail development along this whole Interstate 20 corridor. The closest regional development is really Terrell and what's happening in Terrell there. To the west, and then as you head to Shreveport. I mean, that's really the only regional retail development type. So there's obviously an opportunity somewhere along this Interstate 20 corridor. We'd like to see it happen in Longview for that regional retail development. So just a few site observations. Mentioned this already. It's along the gateway corridor to Longview. For many, this is their initial perception of Longview. In close proximity to LeTourneau. About 3,000 students, 950 or so, and those numbers might be a little old. I think they're pretty close. That typically are not counted in the census numbers. So, when we're out there pitching this site to retailers and developers, we have to make sure and talk about the proximity to the university and how that's going to impact the site as well, because it is in very close proximity there. So that was just a few of the observations, just initial observations my team had on the site. We looked at the site, the 6.62 acres, to really identify what could happen on that site. What are some potential opportunities there? Wanted just to share with you a couple of retailer site requirements. If we're looking at something like, we'll start down at the bottom here. If we're looking at somebody like a medium-sized outdoor store, they're looking at about 5 to 7 acres to do a site. If we're looking at maybe a coffee shop, a national brand coffee shop, they're looking at half an acre to 1 acre, maybe a little bit more if they require a drive-through. If we're looking at, just so you know what we're looking at here, big box merchandise, they're looking at 10 to 12 acres. So probably wouldn't work on that site. Full service restaurants typically look for 2 to 3 acres. Sometimes you can do some shared parking between casual sit-down restaurants where you might be able to get those restaurants in, 1.5 acres, 2 acres if there's shared parking there. Limited service restaurant, more of a fast food type, is looking for 1 to 1.5 acres. Pharmacies, national brand pharmacies, look for about 1.5 to 2 acres. And then limited service hotels, like you have quite a few out on that corridor already, they're looking at roughly 1.5 acres to 2 acres to do something out there. So just wanted to make you aware of that. Our team, what we did is we put together several different scenarios, 6 different scenarios for the site, and just hypothetical scenarios on what could happen out there, what the return on investment might be. These could be changed up. There's a number of different things you can do with a site that size. But scenario 1, in no particular order, but at scenario 1, we just said, what if there was an outdoor store on that site? With that being really a regional site, that being a site that people are driving back and forth, a lot of hunting, fishing going on in this region. If it was an outdoor store, total retail sales would be anywhere from $10 to $15 million, okay, for a store like that. Scenario 2 we looked at was limited service hotel, full service restaurant, pharmacy on that site. Looking at the total retail sales for the retail portion of that would be about 11.5 million retail sales, with 2.5 or so from the hotel as well. Scenario 3 we looked at was pharmacy, a full service restaurant, and also a coffee shop. About 12.5 million in retail sales from that. Scenario 4 was 2 full service restaurants, and then also a coffee shop as well, about 7.5 million. Scenario 5, we looked at just 4 limited service fast food restaurants or limited service restaurants, $6 million potential there. And then scenario 6, we looked at some type of entertainment venue. What's missing on the corridor as well is some kind of entertainment venue. So just to throw an example out there, a water park. If there was something like a water park, we're working on a water park in another community we're working in. So I was able to talk to the CEO of that company. He said their sales are roughly 2.5 to 3.5 million, but typically additional development comes around something like that. So these were just a few scenarios we took a look at. Just wanted to show the difference in what return on investment is as far as retail sales tax dollars, those sort of things. So like I said, these could change, but a couple of good scenarios to take a look at there. It looks like from a retail sales standpoint, obviously the entertainment venue would have the lowest in retail sales. Highest would be maybe scenario 3 or scenario 1 there, the outdoor store, or maybe that combination of scenario 3, pharmacy, restaurant, coffee shop. So wanted to point that out. There's a number of different things you can do with 6 acres. Just a couple of conclusions we took from this. Due to the lack of regional retail development located along Interstate 20, this site has the potential to be a catalyst project for turning the Interstate 20 corridor in Longview into a regional retail development. We expect additional properties as this site develops. We expect it to be a domino effect. Other sites developing. That's typically what you see, especially what we've seen on a number of different projects like this. If you look at some additional regional developments that have just taken place along major interstates, I just threw a couple out there. Central Texas Marketplace in Waco is one of a newer shopping center that's come in, and also the New Braunfels Town Center at Creekside, new regional development that's happened along an interstate. Already mentioned this before, but with the only regional retail competition along Interstate 20, you've got Terrell and you've got Shreveport. Really feel like there's an opportunity. The key is here, Longview is competing with the other communities along that corridor. I don't think you're going to see multiple regional developments locate along this corridor. It's going to be one that are at least initially, or at least in any time soon. If possible, effort should be given to secure additional acreage. That's a little bit tough with the site and what happens there, or what's happening with the site with topography issues. Our opinion is to let one developer, and I'm probably preaching to the choir on this, but let one developer control the entire 6.62 acres. That's what we've seen work the best in other projects we've worked on. Since I completed since I gave this presentation last, we added a little bit to it, some additional things to it, but we've also reached out to developers. And just initially on this site, we've reached out to what I call the Power 5 developers in the state of Texas, the top 5 developers in the state of Texas. 3 of them have interest. We already have had one that's had a broker out here looking at the site. So quite a bit of interest, 3 out of the 5 initially. Another one reached out to us and said, hey, we absolutely have, terrible story, but said we actually have interest in the site, but I just had a heart attack. And it's going to be a couple weeks before I can get out here. So 3 of the top 5 and what we call power developers have some level of interest. Takes a little bit of time, but really feel like this site has potential to be a catalyst. We look at sites like this all over the U.S., really all over the state of Texas as well. So I think that's just kind of our initial assessment there.